Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports.
But other sightings apparently were taken more seriously.
And one in particular, an incident called the Rendlesham Forest Incident, also known as Britain's Roswell. This was in 1980, shortly after Christmas, when a few American airmen who were stationed in the UK...
I am your host, Vinnie Adams. The following is an interview with Carl the Crusher. Carl is a UFO researcher, investigator, covering many aspects of the phenomena. In this interview, we dig deep into Carl's investigations and ongoing work at Mount Wilson Ranch. I would appreciate it if you could just take a second to like, comment, share, and most importantly, subscribe. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy this interview with Carl the Crusher. Carl, welcome back to the show, brother. It's been a while. How you doing, man?
Doing good, Vinny. Thanks for having me. It's good to see you again.
It's a pleasure, man. And I've really been looking forward to really trying to dig as deeply as possible into Mount Wilson Ranch. I mentioned to you just before we hit record that I kind of watched all those documentaries and stuff that you put out on your channel earlier in the year, or actually probably getting closer to a year ago now. And I was just enthralled by it. And I feel like it went a little bit under the radar in the community. And so recently I've been kind of digging back into it a little bit and just almost seeing things I didn't see the first time around and realizing that there really is something to it, man. So I'm really excited to kind of get to, hear all about it and your actual boots on the ground investigations. So let's kickstart it right back kind of historically. And if you could just kind of give me a bit of the background on Mount Wilson and the kind of area and the land.
Yeah, so it's a fascinating spot. The current owner of the ranch, basically his family contacted me through Instagram, kind of told me a little bit about the place and said that it was connected to Skinwalker Ranch. And initially the owner, Jeff McBurney, he was kind of like frustrated because he saw the New York Post articles by Stephen Greenstreet coming out about Skinwalker Ranch and Brandon Fugal, all the criticism and everything about the research going on over there historically. And some of the photographs that were used in those videos were of his property in Nevada. They weren't of the Skinwalker Ranch team in Utah. He could see in the photograph that it was Bigelow and these other people, he didn't know who they were, standing right in front of his property at Mount Wilson Ranch, Nevada. But here's Greenstreet talking about Skinwalker Ranch and has the location wrong. So he contacted me and shared that with me, and that intrigued me, like, hang on, is there a second location? So I went and started trying to look into it. Like, I've gone up around Skinwalker Ranch and Blind Frog Ranch and these other spots. And so I definitely wanted to go over there, see if it was real or not, or what the whole deal was. And as I've dug into it, it's gotten more and more fascinating. If you want to go back to the very beginning, I mean, the petroglyphs in the area, the ancient petroglyphs, date clear back to some of the oldest ones in the world, or and even in the North America, definitely. The ones around Pyramid Lake and around Area 51 could be around 10,000 years old, or maybe older. We don't know, but they're very interesting and mysterious. The ancient legends of there being giants that were found, like bones of giants inside of Lovelock Cave, and the Native American stories about all of that. There's lots of weird stuff. All the carvings and petroglyphs all look like weird supernatural encounters and entities. But at Mount Wilson Ranch specifically, there's been Clovis period, like arrowheads and indigenous artifacts found all over the place up there. There's ritual stone circles, metates, which are like grinding stones for preparing food. So there's been people there for potentially thousands of years, and they would migrate from Mount Wilson and go down into the valley to Alamo and right down where Area 51 is now in the winter time. And then they would go back up in the summer to Mount Wilson and camp and live up there. But the artifacts that we find up there that are really old are like more ceremonial. Like they're some of it's used for hunting and gathering and things like that, but a lot of them are like really big 8 to 10 inch long, beautiful obsidian spearheads that look like they belong in a museum that have just kind of been like buried by the creek, almost like an offering to the river or something. And so there's a lot of historical evidence as far as the indigenous people considering that mountain and that area special and sacred that goes clear back. And then as the story moves forward, historically up into the 1800s, the late 1800s, there was original settlers that built a cabin and started some mining, prospecting and searching around there. And there's even evidence of roadways, like hand-placed stone cart paths that we found back around the mountain that could be when the Spanish came, and the rumors are that the Spaniards came through there and they enslaved the Native Americans and forced them to dig in the mines and bring back gold and things. But there's also evidence like corn and different objects like that, archaeological evidence of indigenous people that basically required people from South America from Montezuma's time coming up and trading with the people. So the stories of there being Montezuma's tribes and people coming up and interacting and trading and there being stuff found under there goes all the way back too. But in the 1800s, the owner, Jeff, has found a sword on the side of the mountain. It's a ritual sword again. It's like a Freemasonry sword by the group, the Knights Pythias. And it looks like some kind of an initiation sword that they would have used in their little esoteric cult or whatever. And that was found just laying on the side of the mountain too. So the interesting question is, what were they doing there? And why did they have maps or something that led them to go there? And were they somebody important? We don't really know. We're still going to have an archaeologist come and help us open the sword to see if there's a name on the blade or anything like that. So the story is that the miners from the 1800s into the early 1900s, when they started taking over the place and just prospecting, that they got into this tunnel system. And the story is that it was like previously accessed by the Native Americans. So they got into this known tunnel system under the mountain. And when they went down there, they ran into something that freaked them out. And so they basically evacuated the tunnels and sealed it off. And then the whole historical records of the place kind of go like under the covers. You have no idea what's going on. It all goes like black projects. And the very earliest days of like the Star Wars program that ended up being officially like Ronald Reagan's Star Wars program, they sent a whole team of archaeologists. They say they were archaeologists up there to Mount Wilson, and they built houses and brought in army barracks and all this stuff, put in infrastructure and updated the whole place. And the guy that was managing the property during a phase of that, towards the end of that, was one of Howard Hughes' best friends and one of his general contractors in Nevada that used to build a lot of stuff for him. So Howard Hughes being up there in the early days of the Star Wars program, they were all up there. And the story goes that when the archaeologists started to remove these indigenous artifacts and explore the mountain to try and, they were going to put a missile silo in the mountain, right, as part of the early days of the MX missile program. So they're surveying the mountain. They find all the indigenous artifacts. They come across the same story of the tunnels with the miners. And we have no idea what happens, but there was a whole lot of money and a whole lot of tunneling and equipment that was used up there at the ranch with power lines and all kinds of stuff that went on. And the stories around that from the locals are that they were digging underground, pulling all kinds of artifacts, even bodies or mummies and stuff up out of the ground. And then there was this outpouring of paranormal activity. There was like these ghosts that started appearing. These 3 extraterrestrials that looked like goblins would appear to people and like scare them or deliver a message. And the whole thing goes like the X-Files. And so then you have this official MX missile program, the Star Wars program. We have no idea what they were doing, but then all of a sudden, Bigelow, Robert Bigelow is there. He buys the property. He's got Eric Davis, Jacques Vallée, Hal Puthoff, the founder of the remote viewing program, the who's who, Colm Kelleher. They're all in these photos up at Mount Wilson Ranch when they're supposed to be at Skinwalker Ranch. So what were they looking for? And so the locals and all the stories about what Bigelow was doing there and when they talked to him and those people and what they saw and what was happening, all of that indicates that there's some kind of an alien structure or mysterious thing in that mountain that they were trying to get access to for reverse engineering technology and getting metamaterials and biological material, all of it. Everything that you hear about now, it's like that's what they were doing at Mount Wilson, but they only talk about Skinwalker Ranch. So that's interesting. If you go clear back through the history, it's just a huge rabbit hole. So it's really hard for people to keep up with it all.
Yeah, man, it's fascinating. It really is. And it does some of it does sound very similar to Skinwalker, how Bigelow obviously heard the stories of what the I forget the family's name right now, what they were experiencing, or the
Shermans.
Paranormal. That's right. The Sherman family's experiences with multiple types of phenomena. And, here we have rumors of all sorts of strange things happening as well. Is that how Bigelow heard about Mount Wilson? Do we know? He just heard these stories and, he does what he does and just buys ranches.
Yeah, so he had a lady on his team. I think her name was Shelley Davis. I think that was her name. I might be wrong about that. I'm trying to remember, but she was kind of like responsible as part of the team to research out potential hot spots where there was a lot of UFO sightings or things like that. But part of the deeper story to that is that because Hal Puthoff is on the team, he was the founder of the remote viewing program, the psychic spy program that they were doing with the Army, Project Stargate, trying to spy on the Russians. And the story is they were developing that psychic spy program along with this like new phased array radar system, like anti-missile defense system, that the combination of that two, they basically started spotting and identifying these locations, like that there's a structure in Mount Shasta, or there's one off Catalina Island, and there's one under Area 51 or Mount Wilson. And the story is that the very early days in the MK Ultra program, they started running into this alien stuff. And they start finding it with this ground penetrating radar system that are running into underground structures and things that aren't supposed to be there. So then they have to form these research teams to go find out what's there and deal with it, and that develops into this whole reverse engineering UFO program and the whole 9 yards. So yeah, it's interesting to think of what was going on. Yeah, everybody focuses on Skinwalker Ranch, but it is really a similar story that indicates that there is a lot more than just one location where this happened. Like Ross Coulthart talks about there being a big UFO so big that they can't move it, and that it's still on. And so they build a facility over it. And that sounds so similar to like all these other places that it doesn't surprise me, that could be the case. So if there's one in Nevada, maybe they built Area 51 right over top of it, but there could be several. Mount Wilson was just one of them. It's like 200 feet down and it's too big to move. So what do? You try to get access to it, get what you can, secure the story around it, and leave. I don't know.
Yeah, and do you think anyone actually, because there's talk of there potentially being this structure under Mount Wilson, or even people have said a UFO. Do you think anybody has actually got that far to discover it and then it's been hushed up, or do you think that no one's really successfully got that far?
I think there's a lot of evidence that they actually did, or they want that story to be there. Part of it is there's a book that we found recently that was written by Jacques Vallée that's called Fast Walker. And I just finished reading it. The whole book tells all the exact same stories as what you hear about Mount Wilson Ranch in Nevada. And in the book, even though it's fictional, even the characters in the story sound like he's mixing the names around between the people on his team that were there at Mount Wilson. So he publishes this book called Fast Walker in 1999. And the pictures that we have of Jacques Vallée and all of them doing their research at Mount Wilson are from 1996, just like 3 years before. And the whole story is a story about these people, including fighter pilots coming out of Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, witnessing this giant mountain kind of shaped like a pyramid, and these UFOs, these big football stadium sized craft, they keep witnessing daytime and nighttime going in and out of the mountain, like at the bottom of the mountain, like they see them flying like they're going to crash, and then it's like they just absorb into the mountain and disappear. And so this leads to this whole investigation, and this is all supposed to be in the fictional book by Jacques Vallée, Fast Walker, but he talks about it being in Nevada near Area 51, locals and pilots seeing this. He even tells a story about a UFO abducting a woman, where like 3 goblin type aliens get out and take her, and it sounds exactly like the Mount Wilson Ranch caretaker that was there when Bigelow was there, Donna Bardeen, and her stories of like encountering these 3 entities on the road and stuff. And so the whole story is there, and it is about this whole underground base in the mountain where both humans and extraterrestrials are sharing and trading technology around a UFO, this whole big highly intelligent shape-shifting sphere thing that changes into a flying saucer and an orb and disappears and comes back and does mind control and all this. And it's in this underground layer, and it's been there for tens of thousands of years. And
Wow.
the whole book is about this team going to this ranch in Nevada, going underground and encountering this laboratory with a UFO in it and the aliens. And they don't know if it's part of MK Ultra or if it's a real UFO. And that's like the whole story. But the timeline and all of it matches. And when you actually go to Mount Wilson Ranch, there's the photos, there's the people, and there's still like a signal. There's still some ultra low frequency pulsing out from underground, and we're trying to triangulate. Like there's really stuff there. We've even had leaked information from Bigelow's old team members that have sent us satellite images and stuff of that are labeled alien mining operation, and it looks like a tunnel system going down to this big triangle underground. So it all lines up, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. So, you said you were contacted by Jeff through Instagram, initially. At that time, did he start telling you about anything that he was experiencing, whether paranormal or UFO sightings on the ranch?
Yeah, I mean, when I got up there, a lot of it he let me kind of discover, and he would introduce me to locals and let me interview them and get it right from them. Like in some of the rooms that are supposed to be haunted or whatever, he just let me stay in there and see if stuff happened, and then he'd tell me afterwards, So there was some of that, but a lot of the historical evidence, he wasn't really sure too. He did buy the ranch directly from Bigelow. So he went down to Vegas, went into Bigelow's office, met with him off of a newspaper ad, and didn't know about there being a whole bunch of stuff there. But he did tell me that Bigelow told him that he thought there was an alien base under the mountain. He did tell Jeff that he saw a ghost inside of what we call the shaman room now. They just called it room 1. He told the story of seeing a ghost in there, and that he was told by that ghost to leave the property. That was the story that he told. Bigelow also told Jeff that he saw a big UFO go in and out of the bottom of the mountain, and mentioned some of that stuff. But at the time, Jeff's mindset was like, wow, this is just like a cool story for my friends to come up, hang out at the saloon and at the ranch, But since then, since buying the property, he keeps running into all this stuff, paranormal things after his father died, and animal mutilation down in the meadow, and seeing big balls of light go in and out of the mountain, getting woke up in the middle of the night because there's like an earthquake, and they think that there's like a plane crashing into the ground, and they go outside and there's just nothing there. Just all kinds of weird stuff like that. And then we just keep finding these artifacts and everything around, and this weird signal, to the point that even when you're laying there in bed trying to go to sleep, you can feel like this like this vibration coming up through the earth. It's very strange. And you have weird dreams and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, so he's experiencing stuff, but he more kind of is interested in like can we dig into the tunnel? What's really there? Can we get down to it? If we need to use like dynamite and explode stuff up, let's find it out and get to the bottom of it. So he's been really cool to work with.
That's amazing, man. And like, going back to the documentaries that you've filmed and put out from your investigations, can you talk to us about some of the equipment that you've used and some of the things that you've picked up? Because I seem to recall some strange readings from inside the saloon that you mentioned as well. So what sort of stuff were you encountering?
Yeah, so I usually go pretty light. I try to carry just like stuff I can fit in my backpack. So I carry different Geiger counters to try and detect radiation, different EMF sensors to see if there's any weird like magnetic or electromagnetic energy or underground power lines or something like that could be giving off false readings. What else? I have thermal imagers and night vision camera of all different kinds. We bring in experts that have ground penetrating radar, magnetometers, professional drones and things to try and scan the ground and do LiDAR and all that. And we've even made and had custom equipment brought in from Skinwalker Ranch that Eric Bard has made for us. One of them that we just recently used for season 2 of Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, that's going to come out in June. We use this piece of equipment called a log periodic, which was like a antenna that we use to triangulate the signal where it's coming out of the ground. So we could set up and do experiments and try and communicate with it. And at one point we had, 2-hole, what they call UFO DAPs. It's UFO data things. They're like tripod sky watching cameras that they can detect everything from meteorites coming in the atmosphere to airplanes going over to all of that. So they're like UFO watchers, to watch the sky for those fast walkers if they're there, right? So we had 2 of those to get 2 different angles and overlay. We were watching all the flight log data. We were watching all the satellite data, if there's satellites going overhead. I mean, we had a whole grid set up when we do full-blown experiments like that to where we can capture all of it. But we'll even do some more pseudoscience stuff where we'll do like meditation experiments, remote viewing experiments. We'll even use a spirit box and do paranormal investigating, try to talk to voices and radio signals and things like that. So we're all the way across the board with what we'll use and who we'll bring in to try and figure it out.
Yeah, no, it's great. I think that's really good to kind of look at it from so many different perspectives and not just kind of narrow your focus too much on one thing. I mean, would you say you've picked up a lot of anomalous sort of data readings across the board from all that kind of different sensor equipment?
Yeah, so I've only one time been able to fly a drone up there successfully, and even then the video data came back all like washed out white, like the white balance was totally thrown off. I had to fix it all.
Wow.
I have lots of false like compass readings, and GPS is constantly disrupted. So even when we bring the professional drone crew in, like when the History Channel came and filmed there, they had this really expensive professional drone team to do the ground penetrating radar stuff. And they crashed that drone up there so many times. And then the GPS data came back. They flew it over this spot in the ranch and it crashed, and the GPS data recorded, and the drone was convinced that it was like flying over Cuba, not Nevada. So it was in the wrong part of the world. And it happened again when they came back. So we had a whole, like just in November when they came back, we flew the drone again. I can't talk about what happened, but we got totally spoofed false data, false GPS data again in a totally different spot, but at the same flight angle and weird stuff. So it's like, we also get this, this ultra low pulsing frequency that responds to us. So it's kind of hard to describe, but it's like setting up equipment and trying to listen to the entire spectrum, even beyond what you can hear with your ears, trying to hear in the ultra high and ultra low range, and seeing if we can get any signal, and then filtering out like anything that we know is man-made, all the power lines, the radio, satellite, all that. And so we get into the right bandwidth to look around, and we found this really ultra low noise cancellation range where there's this pulsing signal coming out of the ground that when we copy it and we project it back into the earth, this thing changes amplitude and frequency and responds to us like it's trying, like it will mimic us, like it copies us and does the same thing back. And even inside that signal is this weird ticking and chirping that we have to analyze to see if it's like a form of communication.
Sure.
But the magnetometer data and everything that the professional team comes in and does, they're finding evidence of there being a very large, triangular shaped, highly ferrous object 200 feet down, at least under the meadow, in front of this old 1800 settlers cabin that is resonating and responding just like ringing a bell, or like two tuning forks that sympathetically resonate with each other. We can talk to this thing and it responds to us. And even when we use high powered lasers, like Jacques Vallée's old experiments from Close Encounters of the Third Kind type stuff, high powered lasers and sound, we get an answer and we get a response back. So the question is, how do we resolve this? Is it real communication or is it government stuff? And really, how do we get down into the tunnel system, which we've been doing a lot for that too. I can talk about a little bit, but not a lot, but we've been trying to get access into this tunnel system and running into a lot of old evidence there too, that lines up. So if we can get underground and get into the previous team's access into this chamber, we might be able to get in there and see what they had access to back in the 1940s up through the 80s maybe. So who knows?
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, let's talk a bit. I wanted to sort of touch upon the episode in season 1 of Beyond Skinwalker, which I refreshed myself with earlier today. And I mean, before we go into kind of the work that they were doing, I just wondered if you could just talk to the actual legitimacy of the work, the experiments, that this isn't just created for TV to you know, like people criticize Brandon Fugal and the Skinwalker team saying it's made for TV. So if you could just talk to the legitimacy of the actual experiments, that'd be great.
Yeah. So everything that we did for the History Channel, we did it for real. We used real equipment, real sensitive data. There's a certain gray area where, like, you know, Andrew Bustamante, he's interpreting data like this frequency data on a computer screen, and it goes over my head. So I'm like, I have to take his word for it sometimes, you know, but as far as whether it's real or not or whatever, but everything that I know as far as being on set and the experiments that we're doing, the intent that we're doing, we never staged or faked anything. Nobody ever told me how to say anything. They never told me how to talk. You know, if any direction, there's like, basically they'll give you a starting point, like, okay, well, here's what we're doing right now. We're going to run this experiment down in the meadow, see if we can do this. And they basically say action, and we start going, and it's on the fly. Like me and Jeff and Andy and Paul, we're all talking about it. They're asking me questions and we're trying to figure it out. And sometimes we fail, you know, like it doesn't go anywhere. So we have to keep rethinking it, or we have equipment problems. So maybe we'll like reset and try to start over if somebody screws up. But the only time we ever had to like what you would consider staging anything is if like a camera guy wanders into the set and gets on camera. But that never even happens either. Like there was a couple times where it was just like totally dumb, and so we had to start over. But most of the time, like they even let me film all the behind the scenes with my camera equipment. So when we're not doing anything and their cameras aren't going, I'm still filming and getting it all anyways. And so that whole wall we were able to break down, and nobody faked anything. If they did fake it, I would have got it. You know, I would have caught it on my cameras and stuff. And it was really cool when the crew came back up for season 2 to film in November. The very first meeting, the producer Dave gets everybody together in the diner, and his whole speech starts with like, out of everywhere we're going for this season, like, we have no idea what we're going to run into here. We can't plan on what's going to happen, and it's totally unexpected. So we have an idea of what experiments we're going to run, but everybody has to be just ready to go. Like, this is almost like filming on a wildlife reserve. You don't know when the tigers are going to show up, like, so they got to stay ready. And they had that whole meeting about how, we're not faking anything, so we got to be frosty here. You got to stay aware. And there was a lot of times where even the camera crew, the sound guy, and the producers ended up in front of the camera getting interviewed because they became experiencers as part of it. They had stuff happen to them off camera, and it ended up part of the show. And some of that happened.
And this is going to be in season 2.
I hope so. Yeah, they filmed
Wow.
two whole episodes plus a bonus episode, so should come out in June. All of that. I got
That's
a
amazing.
ton of it on the behind the scenes I can release too, so it'll all be in there.
Oh, that'd be really good. That's the thing I picked up from the season 1 episode is, you had these really sort of almost freak snowstorms, and which kind of gave the team very limited amount of time in which to kind of do the work they needed to do. And so, I think at the end of that first episode, you see them blowing the 2 sort of mine entrances to try and get access, which isn't successful. So I was just like, oh my goodness, they need to go back. So,
Yeah.
do you think, I want to sort of ask you about, did you get any further into the mines in this new one? I'm sure you can't talk about it, but do you think that's the main focus, or are there other angles that you guys can kind of look at as well?
Yeah, it's a broad spectrum, but yeah, we're really, like, our whole thing is we're not afraid to dig. We're not afraid to use dynamite or whatever. We want to get access. Like, we're not tiptoeing around that, like we can't do it or we're afraid of a curse or something like that. So we're kind of just going for it. And so, yeah, the idea was there's all these indigenous artifacts, so we have to be careful. I'm kind of a little bit in charge of that, along with Chris, the archaeologist that we work with. And so part of it is like how we're going to go in here and access this. We don't want to just destroy stuff. We're not going to go in and trounce over where there could be things, burials or whatever. So we're careful about that. And so part of why we pick where we go to try and dig or use dynamite, we're trying to find where those original tunnels or cave systems were. There's like something like 62 different cave systems in that mountain that they've surveyed, but only like 2 of them have actually been accessed and explored. The rest of them are just there. And so we went up to these lava vent tubes that looked like they were previously mined out and then filled back in, tried to use the backhoe and the dynamite and explode them. But it was like a blizzard rolled in. We were only there for like 10 days. And right at the end, when we start to use the dynamite, it was like a huge blizzard came in and just snowed over. So it was like we would set an explosion off, like 30 sticks of dynamite. By the time we would hike down there to look in the hole, it was already full of snow again. So it didn't even look like we set an explosion off.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell are we going to do? So we ended up, the last shot, we did like, I think like 81 sticks of dynamite or something crazy, and shot a big hole out, and a huge boulder just fell right in where the hole goes. And you can kind of see behind it. But the biggest thing is we found a spot way closer to the ranch that's not so far up the mountain that is an obvious like sinkhole where stuff was buried, tons of old equipment. I can't talk about what we dug out of there, but we have totally dug out that hole. We even brought in a huge like $1 million drill to try and drill it. And you're just going to have to wait. I'm under contract. I can't talk about what happened, but
I get it.
Way crazier than a blizzard showing up. We had a phenomena occurred that you'll just have to watch and see what happened that affected half of the crew, the equipment and everything. It was pretty wild. So, and I got a lot of the behind the scenes of that, to where I even have emails I'm supposed to look up and sign because they want my footage for the show.
Wow.
Because they didn't even get it on camera, some of it. So Yeah.
It's so hard not to try and dig into that, but I'll leave that for now because I appreciate that you can't talk
I'll just
about
say
it.
that like we've definitely found validated stuff. We know that Bigelow is there. We know that before him, there was definitely government stuff going on in that same hole, in that same pit down there. But yeah, what we found, you just have to wait and see. It's not over yet.
Fascinating. Okay. Have there been any incidences of the hitchhiker effect or any other kind of biological effects?
There's been a few concerns about that as far as the biological thing. We always try and keep an eye on that. Anytime anybody starts to get like headaches or ongoing weird dreams or anything, we all openly talk about it and we analyze it. There's been a couple of people that have gone and gotten checked because they've been worried they've got like a lump or having headaches and weird things, and it's always turned out fine, and there hasn't been anything as far as the health effects. But all of the locals up there, I say that loosely, like all of them, but a lot of people that I've talked to, even that work in the local and the county government and stuff, have told me stories about abductions and visitations and seeing shadow figures and having those three entities appear to them and take them in the night and stuff like that. And these are people who are like, I don't want to say their name, but there's people who are like in the local government in the community and stuff that have told me stories, and so they're supportive about figuring out what it is. And they've been, really on our side and Jeff's to figure it out and try to get answers, because a lot of people have been affected. But as far as like, I think it's kind of ongoing. A lot of people have had sightings, even the crew from the History Channel. There was guys on the camera crew that were waking up like yelling like, I won't go, I can't go with you, and they're like waking up yelling in their sleep and stuff, having nightmares and things. All of my experiences have always been pretty positive. I've got kind of a grip around it where when I go up to Mount Wilson, I start having dreams about my dad who's passed away, like recurring dreams about him. I have Native American themed dreams about that place and about people that live there, stuff like that. As far as like the hitchhiker thing, following people, I haven't really heard a lot of that as far as it following people home, except for just that whole region and area, the local community and county up there. A lot of people have got stories, and a lot of people have worked at the site. They've worked at the Nevada test site in Area 51, and maybe they've got stories or won't talk about that too.
It's fascinating, man. And like you're good friends with Chris Bartell as well. And, Chris has been out there with you, on a lot of these investigations. And, for anyone that doesn't know, he works at Area 51 and Skinwalker Ranch, and has openly talked about his experiences working on the ranch as a security officer and stuff. Like, does he still have access to any of the Bigelow team or anything like that? Has he managed to kind of get any information about Mount Wilson and the work that was done there previously?
A little bit. A lot of his inside information does revolve around the background of Skinwalker Ranch, and so it all ties in and correlates. Like everything that we dig up together. I was just texting him before this show too, Chris and I, and we keep finding information that validates his confusion and experiences while he was at Skinwalker, because you have the same people. He worked at Bigelow, and he always heard that there was a second site or like a control site or another research site, but he never knew where, never heard that it was Mount Wilson or any of that. And so all of this is informative to him too. Plus he also sees in these photos, people like Dr. Tim Ryan and Hal Putoff and some of these characters at Mount Wilson as part of the team that he didn't realize were involved during his time at Skinwalker. And so those dots connect to more patents, specific patents that those people were given a lot of funding for. So that whole story of there being, $22 million that Bigelow had to go find UFOs at Skinwalker Ranch, they had way more money than that. when you look at Hal Puthoff, Tim Ryan, and all of them together and what they were doing, they had way more than 22 million. And they had a whole team that were serious about this, and spending a ton of government money from DARPA and the Army and the Air Force and all of it combined. And we have more pictures of them at Mount Wilson than we do of them at Skinwalker. So all of those dots connect, and what they were involved in the years before, what the patents were supposed to do when it comes to anti-gravity stuff and phased array systems, all the way down to even making people think they were abducted with mind control when they weren't, and weird stuff like that. All of that's layered in like a cake into this story of what they were doing up there and why. So I think the more Chris looks into it, it's validating as to why was he taken to Reno and given an MRI by Kit Green. And now Kit Green he's the doctor working with Gary Nolan, and they're all part of this whole whistleblower thing with Congress talking about interference syndrome or Havana syndrome that can happen when you encounter UFOs. All these guys were at Mount Wilson, in the photos. And it's like everybody ignores that. It's weird to me, and
I think go on.
If they were in an underground alien base and they captured a UFO, I mean, the guy from the phone company came up there. Last time I was at Mount Wilson, the guy from the phone company that was there the day that Bigelow saw the ghost in the room that night before, he was up there the next morning to work on the phone lines. And he told us that Bigelow was acting like a crazy person, telling everybody, I saw a Native American. And he told us the whole story about this. And he said that Bigelow flat out told him that in that moment, he was like, this guy's crazy, but Bigelow flat out told him that day that they were there trying to use a system to capture a UFO that was coming in and out of the mountain. And their plan was they had big freezers. They were going to capture a UFO, crash it. And then they were going to retrieve the entities or the bodies and put them in these freezers and transport them to Area 51. And he flat out told the guy working on the phone lines that the day he was there. So it's weird how it all lines up with that book that Jacques Vallée wrote, everything that we find down to the tunnels. It's really odd.
So is there sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I think that, that's why all of that adding up is part of why Chris and everybody is still interested in it. But that old team, they're all blocking me on Twitter and don't want to talk to me,
Man, that's difficult. That's tough, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what is the link to Skinwalker then? And what are your thoughts on Skinwalker? I'm really kind of confused by what's happening there. If you look back at the NIDS days there, did they find anything, or did they spend 20 years and nothing here, we'll give up now? And I can't seem to understand Skinwalker these days.
It's so blended in. It's one of a couple of things, in my opinion. I think that if it's real, if there really is UFOs, there really is extraterrestrials, then the story that's playing out here is that when the psychic spy program, the remote viewing program, and this early radar defense system program started kind of coming together, MK Ultra transformed into this whole UFO program, this whole psychic spy program on another level, where they're using technology and people. And I think if it's real, they realized that there was these, I guess you could call them artifacts or probes or archaic things that are buried around the earth, to where they are terraforming the earth, or they've always been here. You hear Ross Coulthart talk about it. Bob Lazar talks about the UFO that he saw in Area 51 was part of an archaeological dig. The idea is that these things, instead of being from outer space and from other planets, tens of thousands of years ago, were basically inserted into our planet, and they emit some kind of a frequency that controls the weather or evolves human consciousness in some way, just by bathing in that frequency, or that alien signal somehow changes the earth and the course of humanity. And as people get close to these, indigenous people, or even in modern times, it affects the brain human consciousness or communicates with you and produces these paranormal experiences where you see dead relatives or communicate with aliens or other strange quantum effects, of consciousness. But you can also detect it with the technology and catch it on infrasound and different things like that. So you can the technology is starting to capture some of the evidence of it. So the theory is that all over the planet, in different places, there are these seeded UFOs or alien technology. And there's been this race since World War II to try and be the dominant reverse engineers of that technology and recovering it. And that Mount Wilson Ranch and Skinwalker Ranch were just one of maybe dozens, if not hundreds of sites across the country or North and South America where this team or different teams of people were going and trying to see what was real and what was not. But at the same time, they're also potentially installing radar systems and detection systems, according to Tim Ryan's patents and this other evidence that we have. If you find a giant UFO underground and it's still on or active or coming and going, what do you do with it if you can't move it? You've got to put some kind of a sensor to watch it, to keep an eye on it, to listen to it, to see if it's coming and going, to see what happens. And there's also evidence of that technology being installed in these properties too. So they could have gone to Skinwalker just to put in a detection system, or maybe they had evidence that there's some kind of a craft there too that they were trying to get access to, but they may have gone from one place to another. I think if it's real, that at one point in the 40s or up through that Star Wars program, MX missile program, that they accessed those tunnels and they recovered metamaterials and biologics, and Bigelow's team came in. They may have captured some evidence or more material. And I really think that's a big part of what they're talking about in these whistleblower hearings. How put off is the guy with Tom DeLonge right now that they claim has metamaterials there with Tom DeLonge at To the Stars Academy. He was in those photos at Mount Wilson. He was at Skinwalker Ranch. So where did they get the biologics from that Grush is talking about? Where did they get the metamaterials from? Jacques Vallée says it was some underground base in Nevada by Area 51, which to me sounds exactly like where he's at in those photos, right with those same guys too. The dates all line up, the location lines up, the pictures all line up. It's all there, and we're still getting a signal coming out of the ground. We even have the tunnels, I don't know how much I'm supposed to say about that, but
man, keep going. By all means.
We have evidence of the tunnels,
That's crazy. And I think this is why I kind of picked back up on the work that you've been doing, especially more recently, that with all this information that's come out since the summer with David Grush and everything, I know a lot of people see the UFO subject of just all these separate kind of modules, or what do you want to call them, and it's always about trying to piece this bigger picture together. And going by what you just said there, it really does start putting links to everything, which is what we need, I think. And I think this work has certainly gone under the radar, no pun intended. But you mentioned there about these potential big crafts underground and stuff, and Ross Coulthart. So you must have an idea that when Ross Coulthart's talking about this one specific one that's so big they had to build a structure over it, you must have an idea of a location as to where he might be talking about.
There's a couple of military and Air Force bases in Greenland.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think that it's in Greenland. There's definitely older videos like from the 1990s where you've got obscure people that have whistleblown, talked about UFOs basically getting uncovered, and they always allude to Greenland. I know that Stephen Greer talked about South Korea. He mentioned South Korea. To me, it doesn't surprise me, because I'm like, okay, yeah, there's a giant one underground in Greenland, but I'm busy trying to get in a tunnel for one that's supposed to be, 500 feet triangle under Mount Wilson right here in Nevada, or across the state line there. And at Skinwalker Ranch and elsewhere, I've got John Casey, the researcher he was on the Discovery Channel, and I think on the History Channel show too, Lost the lost gold of World War II.
I remember it. Yep.
Yeah. So he's a friend of mine. He was just messaging me last night. There's a group of indigenous people down in Mexico that have a pyramid in the jungle behind their village that swear that inside the pyramid is a UFO with entities that come in and out and bring them, trade gifts with them and communicate with them. And John wants me to go down there and look at it next summer.
Wow.
To me, it doesn't surprise me that these ancient sites and stuff, were built on top of this stuff, or these significant spots. That's why the Native Americans were at Mount Wilson, and why the 10,000-year-old petroglyphs are right by the front gates at Area 51. And, what did they find there that made them choose to pick a underground base there? What did they build it around? Maybe they just retrofitted it into something already existing.
Sure. Why not? It makes sense. Yeah, 100%. So what would be the next, obviously you can't say anything about this episode coming out for season 2, but what would the next kind of natural progression be as far as your investigation or the bigger investigation at Mount Wilson be?
Yeah, now part of the project is really cool. We're trying to make it so much more open source. So part of what I'm doing is 3D scanning and LiDAR scanning all the historical buildings. So next time I go back, I'm going to 3D scan the saloon, the settler's cabin, and a lot of the spots up there so that people can go online and go through the buildings and look through all the locations and stuff just like they're there. But then also, bringing people in and collaborating. Like, Vinny, if you wanted to come and film a documentary about Mount Wilson and see for yourself, just line it up and just come and see. So that's where we're at right now, is while we're waiting for the History Channel show to come out, I just continue to go back up there like once a month. We continue to progress towards our own research without stepping on the toes of the show,
Sure,
ruining things. But we go back up there and we continue to do the research. And a lot of what we're doing is expanding that out around, trying to find more established settlements where the Native Americans lived, more, how much can I say? Yeah, just circling around that. Now that we have triangulated a lot more and we know where stuff is a lot more based on having the History Channel come, that has pointed the research in a good direction. So we know what to look for and what to listen for and what to do. And the good thing is all of our contracts say that we're allowed to continue to do business as usual, which for us means film documentaries, film videos, share it with the world, and do whatever we want there. So it's not like we haven't closed off. Anybody that wants to come and see and help us figure it out can do that. So that's kind of the next step, is getting the message out, making more people aware so that we can continue the research and get more people to come and get involved. Amazing. I want to talk to Jacques Vallée. I want to talk to Hal Puthoff. I want to meet with all these guys and find out what the hell they did there.
Oh, man, I had the pleasure of meeting Jacques Vallée at the start of November, and if I could have just taken this now, what I've been doing the last few weeks, and I'd have asked him. I'd have said, it's frustrating when you think like that.
It'll happen. The dots will all connect when the time is right. But I think
that's it.
I'm starting to throw more stuff out there and be a little bit more aggressive now that I feel like I'm more confident with what's there. Yeah. I'm throwing bigger shots now.
Nice. I like it. And I suppose YouTube is that kind of your main outlet for kind of new information? Is that the best place for people to go?
Yeah, I just do this kind of stuff full time. So if I'm not out like doing the research in the field, I'm just posting on YouTube. I post on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, just all over the place. Just all the social medias. Yeah.
Amazing. I'll make sure all of your social media links are in the description of this video, along with the Mount Wilson Ranch website, their socials. I think your blog as well. I found that really interesting. Some of your blog articles were really, really good way of kind of getting that story about what's been happening. Any other links that you think people should check out?
I think that's it. Yeah. If you go to the YouTube channel, Carl Crusher, or go to my Patreon page, it's all there. If you want to come to Mount Wilson Ranch and see it for yourself, you can go to the Mount Wilson Patreon, and you can pick which room and just message and go there. I think you can get an overnight stay for $150 just to stay overnight, and pay a little bit more. And Jeff and I will even go show you everything. So that's where we're at.
Amazing, man. I want to get in those tunnels.
Me too, man. If you come, let's do it.
Let's do
I'm
it,
always
man. Let's
dying to
do
go
it.
in those. Yeah.
Oh, we'll speak off camera for sure, man. But listen, Carl, thank you so much for coming on and talking about it, man. I knew this was going to be a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
That's my pleasure, Vinny. Anytime.
And we'll speak again soon. And to everyone watching, please make sure you keep up to date with everything that Carl's doing, especially the Mount Wilson investigation. I think it's some really vital and inspirational work. So once again, thank you, Carl. And we'll see you all again soon.
Yeah,
Take
thanks,
care.
everybody.
Bye-bye.